Hey everyone, welcome back EverFam. So today's video I decided I'm finally going to be sharing my labor and delivery story at 19. So I did get pregnant at 18, I gave birth at 19, and it was pretty traumatic, and I decided I'm going to finally share my story and what happened. So I was due August 16th. I think. August 16th. And I ended up going overdue. So I was talking to a midwife at one of my last appointments, and I was telling her, like, I want to be induced. And I was like, get this baby out of me. Let's go. And she was pretty much saying no, because they don't do that unless I'm like closer to 42 weeks or at least 41 weeks. And I remember my dad had this trip coming up and he was going to be away for a couple days, and I'd already been overdue, so I was like, my dad's not going to be here to see me in the hospital after I have my baby, and that was like huge for me. So I told my midwife, make some calls, do what you gotta do, let me know. So she did, and I was considered an elective induction. I got induced at 40 weeks and 6 days, so I was literally 1 day away from 41 weeks, and I had to do paperwork, we had to make phone calls, she had to fight people on the phone to get me induced because they didn't want to do it. I don't know why. I know people who got induced at 39, no problem, but here I was, almost 41, and that was not the case. Anyway, the day before my scheduled induction, I went to get checked to see if I was dilated at all, and I was already 3 centimeters dilated. So I don't think I was going to go much longer regardless, but I knew that if I had done it naturally, I would have had ever when my dad was away. So we went ahead with the elective induction, considering I was already 3 centimeters. I did not need a Foley balloon. I did not need a sweep or anything like that. I didn't need anything to get me to 3 centimeters. So the way it worked is I decided I wanted to give birth in Windsor, not Leamington, even though it's like an hour drive. But anyway, they told me that they had me scheduled for an induction for that day, August 21st. I was scheduled to go in for. So they don't really, like, you don't just go in the morning. Like, they call you when a room is ready. So it's like they kind of have to wait until someone has a baby for me to go in, take their spot. So it was kind of just waiting game. So I remember sitting by that phone for literally all day, just like constantly like checking it. I had my bags ready, which was like the only positive of being induced. I knew when it was happening, and mind you, I had tried every other self-induction method there is, and I do not recommend it. But yeah, anything you can possibly imagine, I have tried, to no avail. It didn't work, and that is why I went ahead with the actual induction. So yeah, I was waiting for a phone call, and I finally got one at like 4:30. I remember telling Eric to go to work that day because they told me there's a good chance it would be after 4 o'clock anyway, or 3 o'clock or something, and he worked till 5. So it was 4:30 and I got the call. So I call him up, I'm like, get home, come now, like, we're ready to go, stuff. So yeah, he comes and grabs me, and I got a call from my midwife on the way to Windsor that once I'm in labor, I can't eat anything. So I was like, okay, sounds about right. So she's like, make sure you eat a meal before you come, because you will not get one once you get here. So we stopped at Subway, and we ate subs on the way, and I got checked in, and it was easier than I thought. I know my midwife I thought that was going to be there wasn't, and it was a different midwife. I ended up being super thankful for the one I got anyway, because I realized I really would have not liked had my other midwife been there. I really preferred the fact that this one was actually there. Anyway, so I got checked in. I was still at 3 centimeters. And so they told me that they wanted to break my water to see if I would naturally go into labor, or before they decided to start me on the Pitocin, because if it's not necessary, it's not necessary. You know, if I go into labor after they break my water, then I don't need to be on all of that fun stuff. So they broke my water, and I mean, I didn't understand the process of water breaking, especially when it's done for you. They literally take, like, I don't want to scare nobody, but they literally take like a crochet hook and just go. That's it. That's what happens. Yeah, and I got there, they hooked me up right away to hear baby's heartbeat, to hear my heartbeat, my contractions, all that fun stuff. I actually have a couple pictures, so I'm gonna put them here. So yeah, those things that are on my belly are just the monitors to monitor Ever and to monitor myself to make sure we're okay. And her heart rate was actually way too fast. And they could tell that she was under stress. And my heart rate was really, really fast, and so was like our blood pressure, way, way, way too high. So they were giving us fluids to try to hydrate us, or hydrate me, hydrate her through me. So I was on an IV the second I got there, and I remember them saying, we're not going to break your water until you guys calm down and her heart rate calms down, because then it's just high risk. We don't want to all of a sudden put you into labor through induction, because it's allegedly more painful labor, harder labor on baby, harder labor on mom, just a harder labor altogether when you have to be induced, because obviously it's not natural, they're forcing it, and so it is more painful and harder on the baby. So they did not want to start that if she was already having a high heart rate. That was something to be concerned about. So they gave me fluids, so it took half an hour to empty out, and during that half an hour I just kind of waited, and half an hour later they came and checked again, and nothing had changed. So they gave me another bag and said, we're gonna wait another half hour. So I did, and then sure enough, nothing changed, and another half hour went by and another IV bag in me. So at this point I had 3 full IV bags and nothing was changing. And so they contemplated at first whether or not they even wanted to induce me, or whether they just wanted to give me a C-section, because they didn't want to put Ever under any extra stress or any extra, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, than needed to be. And so if they were to induce me, it'd be a lot harder, and they didn't know if they wanted to do that, considering she couldn't calm down. And after consulting with the OB, my midwife decided it was okay to break my water, because the sooner we can get her out, the better. So we broke my water, and considering the fact that Ever had not, her levels hadn't gone back down yet, they didn't want to wait too long to see if I would naturally go into labor, because we just didn't have that much time, knowing she was already in a little bit of stress. So we waited maybe half hour, nothing was happening, so they just put me on, since I already had the IV, and they just kind of added it into my IV. Yeah, they just added the Pitocin in, and we were good to go. I know a lot of people are scared about like the IVs, and honestly the entire labor process didn't scare me. The only thing that scared me was like them checking me for dilation. Hated that. And the IV, but they put the IV on the side of my wrist, and it was the most comfortable thing. I did not feel it. I hate IVs because they're painful, and especially when they tape them down, if they hurt when they go in, they'll hurt the entire time, and you just forget about it after a while, but it does hurt. And whoever did it was wonderful at it, so kudos to them, because I felt nothing, and I was really glad. Anyway, fast forward, Pitocin. They probably give me the Pitocin at like 9, so it was around 11:30. Yeah, it was around 11:30 when I remember the contractions getting really, really painful, and I was like, do you know what, I'm gonna tap out now, because it's gonna get worse, and I'd rather rest a little bit. I was really tired. And so I remember asking for the epidural. However, I was told that 3 women out of the unit, it's not like that big of a unit, so 3 women out of the unit just gave birth within the last 30 minutes. So all of the doctors, all of the nurses, anyone who is trained to do epidurals could not assist me. and I don't know if they were short-staffed or what was going down, but I knew that 3 women having birth within 30 minutes of each other, I knew that everyone, like all hands were on deck, and that I was the least of priorities because I was not giving birth and I did not have a baby out of me yet, so I had to wait. And I remember being told I had to wait, and I was so mad. Oh my goodness. And that is a lesson to learn. When they come around and they say, do you want it now? Because we will be a while before we come back. Take it then. Because I didn't, and I had to wait. The contractions got to the point where they were, they normally only like measure them on a scale from 1 to 100, and mine were getting up to 135 or 136 was the highest I saw mine go. And I didn't really get a let down in between contractions. So normally you're supposed to contract and then it'll go back down, and then in a minute it'll go back up for a minute and down for a minute. I didn't get that. It was 135 for like 2 minutes, then I went down to 80 for about a minute, and then went back up to 135 for a minute and back down to 80. So the lowest I would get that relief from was it going back down to 80 or 70, which at some point is already the tap out point of some woman. So I wasn't really getting a break. And then it got to the point where it was lasting at 135 for longer than 2 minutes. I was not getting a break. They were on top of each other. I still had no epidural in sight. I was like trying to be polite. I didn't want to be the person yelling and being like, get me an epidural. I was just like, can you please like go check if they're ready now? And like, I was trying to be polite because I know that they have to put up with a lot. I don't want to be that. So, I mean, throughout this whole labor, she's been giving me popsicles. So I was doing okay on that sense because I was allowed to have popsicles. But anyway, finally the time comes. It is now 3:30. It is 3:30. It is 4 hours. 4 hours. No, maybe it's 3. 3.5 hours. It was either 3.5 or 4. After I asked for the epidural, that I got it. So let that be a note. Take it when you can get it and ask for it before you need it, because I needed it and it took me 3.5 hours to get. So it was 3:30 and I finally got the epidural. They had excused Eric out of the room because I guess a lot of guys faint when they see the needle of the epidural. They didn't want to have to worry about that, so they just asked him to leave. I kind of hated that part because I would have liked having him around, especially because the contractions were so painful and you cannot move during your epidural. Like, you can't, or you can potentially go paralyzed. So mind you, my contractions were at 135. They were not calming themselves down, so I was in constant shrieking, agonizing pain, and I wasn't allowed to move. I did pretty well, I have to say so myself. I didn't even feel the epidural. Some people are really scared about the epidural, like, does it hurt? Can you feel it? I felt nothing because the pain I had been feeling compared to the pain of a needle, I literally felt nothing. Like, I asked them, I was like, are you gonna do it or what? And they're like, oh, we're already done, we're just taping you up. I'm like, okay, cool. I didn't notice, and that's great because I was really scared about it. So yeah, it took about half an hour to kick in, and they did have to up it a couple times. Eventually they started adding gravel into there too because I was getting really, really nauseous. And then obviously throughout all this I have the labor jitters, you know, your whole body shakes and you're cold and you're aching. What the epidural did was after half an hour it kicked in, so at 4 o'clock in the morning it finally kicked in. So now it had been 4.5 hours since I needed the epidural that I got relief. So essentially when I said I wanted to see how far I could go, I went pretty dang far, because once I was numb and they inserted a catheter and all that fun stuff, they checked how far dilated I was, and I was about 9.5 centimeters. So I went right up until the point where I would have to give birth. Like, they said, had I not gotten it within the next 30 minutes of when I did, I probably wouldn't have gotten it because it would have been too late. So thank goodness I got it when I did, because I do not want to have to go through that naturally, especially if it's not my choice. And so 4 o'clock hits and the labor moves into my back. That is why they had to up it a bit. Not a fun scenario. Once again, more popsicles. Eric took a nap at this point in time because they told him that if he needed to sleep, this would be the time because babe was gonna come soon. And now that I'm kind of calmed down on my pain, take a break. So he took a break. I couldn't sleep though. So my midwife and I were like having like a heart-to-heart conversation for hours. So it was like, I don't know, it was really nice. And yeah, come 7 o'clock, exactly 7 o'clock, she asks me if she can check how far dilated I am. And I said, sure. So she did, and I was 10 centimeters. So she asked me if I felt ready to push. And I said, no, I feel no urge. And she's like, okay, well, do you want to wait a little bit or what? I was like, I don't know, like, what am I supposed to feel when I feel the need to push? Like, what does that feel like? Because I had no idea what I was going through. Like, what do you mean push? Like, is it going to feel like a bowel movement? Like, I had no idea. And she was like, okay, well, let's just like get you in position and see if that changes how you feel, see if it comes naturally, blah, blah, blah. So they put my legs on up, and she pretty much just told me to push. I was like, I don't know what I'm pushing. And she's like, just like, I don't know. She was describing it to me. I was going for it. Eric was right there helping. He was holding my legs up, and I was pushing. And I pushed on every contraction I had for the next 4 hours straight. And I know y'all are thinking there's no way you push for 4 hours straight. I pushed for 4 hours straight on every contraction. I might have had like a minute or two break in between, but I never had more than 2 minutes of a break throughout that entire 4 hours. I was go, 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 ready. We tried different positions. We tried different doohickeys to hold on to like prop myself over, to upside down, to everything. Okay, so 4 hours go by, and during this time I'm losing a lot of blood, and my midwife is getting really concerned because it's a lot of blood, and I didn't really notice too much because like I'm like at this point of view, so I can't see too much of what's going on, especially with my legs propped up. But I just see like they put obviously these pads down before you lay down, and I just see them constantly like every 15 minutes going and taking this pad from underneath me and dumping it in the garbage, and it's like covered in blood. Like the whole entire thing is just soaked in blood. And so she actually went out a couple times to talk to the OB to see if it was okay, like if I was losing too much, because it was a lot. And they kept telling me too, like after the fact, that I had a massive bleed. Anyway, so obviously I did, after I gave birth, I was pretty much informed to the extent of how much I bled. And so I massively hemorrhaged during labor. Obviously, I was insanely swollen because I was pushing for so long, and I ended up losing half of my blood on that table. And they only found that out after, obviously, when they did a blood count, when they took my blood to check whatever, or when they checked all my levels, and they realized that I had lost 50% of my blood. And so I was scheduled to do a transfusion to receive blood. However, my midwives had switched. Long story short, I never got it. And when my midwife did their 3-day checkup, she was actually really upset that the info hadn't been passed on correctly. I almost passed out in my recovery room. I actually did have to sit down on the floor in the bathroom because I couldn't even make it back. I was so swollen I couldn't sit. That was a side of labor I never knew that could happen. Like, I didn't know I could lose half my blood on that table. Like, I knew that people died, but I didn't know that, like, even though I couldn't feel anything was going wrong, something was going wrong. And so obviously recovery was a lot harder for me, given the fact that I had to recover now and replenish all the blood that I had lost, considering I never got my transfusion. By the time they did the 3-day checkup, I was already starting to obviously recover from what I had lost and reproduce it, and so they weren't too worried about giving it to me then. However, it was even written in my file that I was scheduled to get one, and I never did. So 4 hours later, after pushing, I remember her saying, okay, like, this isn't working. We need to get the doctor in here and he needs to use forceps or a vacuum. And it was my choice. And so I told her, you know, what's easiest on baby? And she said the forceps are, but the vacuum's easier on the mom. I was like, well, obviously I'm going to go with the forceps because they're easier on my baby. Like, I don't care if it hurts me. Like, I want my baby to be okay. So we decided on the forceps, but before the doctor came in, she's like, he's down the hallway, he's coming in 10 minutes, like, but I think you can get the baby out before the doctor comes. And I was like, I have been pushing for 4 hours, and you think that within the next 10 minutes I'm gonna magically pop this baby out? Okay. And she was like, no, like, you're crowning. And I was like, no, I'm not. And she's like, yeah, you are. Like, reach down and feel it. I was like, no thanks. And she's like, no. Like, reach down to feel it. You're gonna get more of the, like, adrenaline to push and whatnot. So I did, and it was the weirdest thing I've ever done. It just, I don't even want to describe it. That's just all I'm gonna say. I reached down and I felt her head. And sure enough, obviously they had turned down my epidural a little bit before I started. After like 2 or 3 hours of pushing, they turned it down a little bit so I could feel the contractions more, so that I could push more, but I still couldn't feel that she had come out. So I remember in one push her head came out, and I remember feeling that relief, and I knew that her head had come out, but I couldn't, like, I didn't feel that it came out, like it didn't hurt. I just could feel the relief, and I could feel that pop, and I was like, okay, something's out. And so surely enough, within the next push, I thought to myself, I was like, that's it. It didn't work. I'm gonna have to just get the forceps done. I really didn't want to. And out of nowhere, they just laid her on my chest, and I was like, I did it. Like, it's done. I did it. And craziest feeling, so surreal. She's just staring at me. She doesn't even cry. Like, she's just staring at me. She cried when they took her to clean her up, but the second they laid her back on my chest, that was it. Okay, sorry, my battery died. So yeah, I was at the point where it happened. I pushed her out and they laid her on my chest and they weighed her. She weighed 8 pounds 9 ounces. She was born at exactly 10:37 in the morning, which nobody saw coming considering I was 9.5 centimeters at 4 a.m. But it took that long and she finally arrived. I actually made them reweigh her because I did not believe that I just pushed out an 8-pound baby. But nope, 8-9. And I did tear, but only 2nd degree, so I did have to get stitches. I did finish pushing out the placenta. We contacted family to let everyone know she was here. Eric did his hour of skin to skin right after I did, and the second I was done my hour of skin to skin, I wanted to take a nap because I was so tired. I stayed up this entire time. I did not sleep once. I was trying to nap, and then before I knew it, Eric's parents were there, we had visitors, and I was still in the delivery room. I hadn't even been moved to my recovery room yet, so I feel like there were still pieces of me on this table. No. Wait till the recovery room to have people because you don't want to be in that room with other people and show them what went down. Anyway, Ever was born August 22nd at 10:37 a.m. and her full name is Ever Sylvian Dyke, and she is our blessing. She is our happily ever after. No matter what I had gone through, the first thing I said after I gave birth was, I would do that again. That wasn't so bad. And even though I went through all of that, it wasn't that bad. And I tell everyone that. It's not that bad. It is while you're there, but the second it's done, you forget about it. Even though I couldn't sit for like a week because of how swollen I was down there, it wasn't that bad. And so, yeah, we had to stay in the hospital obviously for our 24 hours, but the second that was done, we headed on home. And I mean, we've been taking it day by day, and here we are, a year and a half later, and this is what she looks like now. And I'm going to include some baby photos as well as other photos, but aside from that, thank you guys for tuning into my video. I hope you like, comment, and subscribe. I hope this helped you. If there's any other mamas who are like, what am I going to get out of birth? they just love listening to birth stories. This is mine, and I'm glad I could finally share it with you guys. So thank you guys for watching, and until next time.